It was on a dreary night of November that I beheld the accomplishment of my toils. With an anxiety that almost amounted to agony, I collected the instruments of life around me, that I might infuse a spark of being into the lifeless thing that lay at my feet. It was already 1 in the morning. The rain pattered dismally against the panes, and my candle was nearly burnt out, when, by the glimmer of the half-extinguished light, I saw the dull yellow eye of the creature open. It breathed hard, and a convulsive motion agitated its limbs. "It's alive!" Welcome to Strip Cover Look, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we are here for Chapter 5 of our chapter-by-chapter read-along of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. In this chapter, we have life. We have the creature transform into the monster and then get ghosted by Frankenstein himself. This video has 3 different sections: a So What Happened recap of this chapter of the novel, a literary criticism section where we talk about all the literary goings-on in the chapter, and finally a writer's corner portion of the video where we talk about some of the stuff that we can take from this video as writers. And this is where the novel starts to pick up, and perhaps where the novel gets a little less believable. So, what happened? It is an evening in November. The evening's candle is nearly dead. It is 1 in the morning, and Frankenstein's creature takes his first wretched breath. In disgust and panic, Frankenstein flees. He reaches his room and sleeps. Takes a little nappy nap, you know. Then he goes back to find the creature thinking of him as a monster, and the creature is staring at him with wet eyes. So he runs away again, and he just walks and walks and walks until he finds himself staring at a random stagecoach. And guess who is inside? Well, dear old Clerval, because the plot needs it. They exchange pleasantries, and Frankenstein takes Clerval back to his place. Frankenstein is fearful that the monster will be just walking around. What would the neighbors think? Much less Clerval. But luckily, the monster has decided to move on with his day. Still, Frankenstein is acting out of character, and Clerval becomes concerned. Then Frankenstein succumbs to a nervous fever, and Clerval nurses him back to health. It is spring before Frankenstein's passion returned, and when it does, Frankenstein asks how he could ever repay Clerval, who had made the journey in order to initiate his own studies, not to nurse Frankenstein. Clerval answers that there is one thing he could do to repay him. Frankenstein is nervous that this is an allusion to his creature. At least, I think that's why the "there is one thing" is scary. But Clerval says that Frankenstein has to write his father and cousin. Clerval also reveals that there is a letter waiting for him from his cousin. We're doing some really interesting things in this chapter, beginning here. The very opening line of this chapter is this: "It was on a dreary night of November that I beheld the accomplishment of my toils." The very first thing we have here with life is November. We have the mention of the accomplishment of my toils, which is the creature coming to life, and it is in November. Now, obviously, November is the fall. Fall equals death. Fall also equals the fall of man, right? If you're talking biblical terms. But here, what we have is the fall equaling life. So we have that sort of dichotomy, or we have that sort of correlation flipped on its head, and we have the life of death. And I think it is interesting to sort of put this in perspective with the idea of the fall, because the fall of man in the Bible was Adam and Eve eating from the tree of knowledge of life and death. And there are some definitive things to go into there. Maybe we'll get there at some point with this novel, but the subtitle of Frankenstein is The Modern Prometheus. It's not on my issue for some reason, but the modern Prometheus, the modern myth of Prometheus, something like that, is the subtitle often correlated with Frankenstein. And the myth of the modern myth of what that was, Prometheus was gifting the knowledge of fire to humankind. So, knowledge of fire, fire of life. There's some interesting things going on just in this one sentence here. But I want to go forward a little bit here. And we have an interesting passage in this chapter, because there are definitely some things going on with Victor and his relationship to Mother and Elizabeth, right? I think everybody sees that. But when we get into this chapter here, we get this. He has brought the creature to life and then decided that it's time for a nap, which I guess we can all sympathize with. I slept indeed, but I was disturbed by the wildest dreams. I thought I saw Elizabeth in the bloom of health, walking in the streets of Ingolstadt. Delighted and surprised, I embraced her, but as I imprinted the first kiss on her lips, they became livid with the hue of death. Her features appeared to change, and I thought that I held the corpse of my dead mother in my arms. A shroud enveloped her form, and I saw the grave worms crawling in the folds of the flannel. The woman he loves, he kisses her and sees his own mother. The woman he loves, he kisses her and sees his own mother. Now, Freud was born, I believe, 20-ish years after this novel was published, died in the early 1900s, right? But what we have from Freud is the idea of the Oedipus complex, and I'm going to read you a little bit from Wikipedia to talk about the Oedipus complex. In classical psychoanalytic theory, the Oedipus complex refers to a son's sexual desire towards his mother and concomitant hostility towards his father, first formed during the phallic stage of psychosexual development. A daughter's attitude of desire for her father and hostility towards her mother is referred to as the feminine Oedipus complex. The general concept was considered by Sigmund Freud in The Interpretation of Dreams, 1899. 81 years after this novel was published, the work on the interpretations of dreams was published. Although the term itself was introduced in his paper, a special type of choice of object made by men, 1910. Freud's ideas of castration anxiety and penis envy refer to the differences of the sexes in their experience of the Oedipus complex. The complex is thought to persist into adulthood as an unconscious psychic structure which can assist in social adaptation but also be the cause of neurosis. According to Sexual Difference, a positive Oedipus complex refers to the child's sexual desire for the opposite sex parent and aversion to the same sex parent, while a negative Oedipus complex refers to the desire for the same sex parent and aversion to the opposite sex parent. Freud considered that the child's identification with the same sex parent is the socially acceptable outcome of the complex. Failure to move on from the compulsion to satisfy a basic desire and reconcile with the same-sex parent leads to neurosis. The theory is named for the mythological figure Oedipus, an ancient Theban king who discovers he has unknowingly murdered his father and married his mother, whose depiction in Sophocles' Oedipus Rex had a profound influence on Freud. Freud rejected the term Electra complex introduced by Carl Jung in 1913 as a proposed equivalent complex among young girls. So I thought that that was an interesting thing to throw in there because obviously you have you have an aversion. Victor, we got to call him Victor because we're going to be talking about his father as well. Victor has a strained relationship with his father. Victor is seemingly in love with the girl who is kind of his sister. And when he has a dream, as we talk about with the interpretation of dreams from Freud, when he has a dream that he has attained the girl he loves, kind of his sister, um, and he is kissing her, he sees his own mother. And this plays into the the big idea for why it is that Victor wants to not really resurrect, wants to create life, wants to re-imbue with life, is the fact that he lost his mother when he was not ready to lose his mother. So all of this goes into the neurotic way that Victor is working so hard towards bringing this gift, perhaps, of life to someone, to a reinvigorated corpse. Just some interesting things going on that level that will probably make their return whenever it is that I get around to making a book review for this book. Frankenstein. This is the greatest irony that I can think of in this novel so far. What does Frankenstein do? Frankenstein reanimates a corpse and then leaves. Frankenstein ghosts a monster. Doesn't say bye. Doesn't say talk to you later text. Just ghosts the monster. What an interesting set of circumstance for Frankenstein himself. We'll get back to this in the writer's corner portion of the video, but I think that it is sort of interesting to conceptualize how it is that Frankenstein did react here. Is do you does that ring true with you? That upon so the way he acts, when I was a kid, we moved houses, and in this new house that we had, I had never seen them before. There were house centipedes. I'd never seen one of these things before in my life. Creeped the ever-loving hell out of me when I was a child, okay? And you would close your eyes and pretend it wasn't there. You would leave the room and then come back because they ran 100 miles an hour and they would be on the ceiling, near the ceiling. You couldn't ever get them, especially when you were a small child. That is exactly how grown man Victor Frankenstein interacts with the creature that he has reanimated. He gets creeped out, he runs away, and he peeks back in the room to see if it's still there, right? And then when he peeks back in the room and it's not still there, he's okay with it. I don't know where it went, but that's better than here. That's better than here and now. The last thing I want to talk about here is something that is completely off topic, completely probably not worth talking about, completely probably not worth mentioning. Do people still faint? Literature from this time period, accounts from this time period, you would read about people fainting. I am nearly 40 years old. I have never fainted. I had a concussion once. Passed out from that. That's a different thing. I've never seen anyone faint. That's not true. I saw one guy faint at his wedding, but it was because he had a condition where his knees would lock up. I don't know how that makes you pass out, but apparently it does. Do people still faint? Here we have a case of Victor kind of getting the vapors and having a mental breakdown and being out for a few months from fall here in November through the spring, or to the spring at least. I don't think we have an exact month when it is that Victor comes out of things. This just doesn't happen anymore. Did it ever really happen? Am I completely discounting the lived experiences of people in previous generations? I don't know how you just pass out. I don't know how you faint. I've never seen anyone faint. Never been around it. Never fainted myself. Never felt I was going to faint. Was that really a thing? Did people have high blood pressure? Was this something where everyone was walking around with diabetes before diabetes was diagnosed? And it caused some type of blood pressure problem? Diabetes does that, right? I think. Maybe. I can't be sure. What was going on that people were just passing out left and right in the 1800s, in the 1700s? You know the accounts, right? I'm not making this up. I'm not talking out of school. And here we have the case of Victor Frankenstein, who just goes apoplectic for 3 months. Well, was that a thing? Was that really a thing? You get these accounts in literature. There's some accounts in some types of biographies. I've read quite a few biographies, and you get accounts of people who just kind of meet their match one day and they were down for a couple months. Did they not have to go to work? Aren't they going to lose their health insurance? What was it that was going on in these previous generations? All right. So here's the thing. With the writer's corner writing criticisms for this chapter, I'm going to get kind of nasty. I'm going to get kind of judgmental. I'm going to get a little bit maybe dismissive. Here's the thing. I cannot dismiss, undersell, short sell, get rid of the cultural impact that has been had by the novel Frankenstein. I don't mean to. I'm not trying to do that. But there are some things particularly egregious in this chapter and that will continue through the novel. Here's the first one. Is Frankenstein a believable character? To this point, I think yes. To this point, I think the answer has definitely been yes, but let's look at his problem-solving skills. We're talking about a very intelligent individual who was able to grave rob, stitch together a corpse, and manifest life into that corpse through whatever the means and process that it was. And what are his problem-solving skills? When he sees that the monster, as it is now called, is alive, he runs away and takes a nap. Then he goes back. That thing is still alive, so he runs away and takes a walk. He runs into his buddy, he runs into his pal, knowing that thing is still alive. And what does he do? He takes his pal back to his house, runs in real quick to check. Oh, okay, we're fine. The monster has run away. That's the problem-solving skills that you're talking about here. And here's another thing I want to... Page 59 of my text here. We get this passage. This is as he found Clerval and is taking Clerval back to his place. I then paused. Oh, I messed up again. Give me 1 second here. Trying to do too many things at once. I then paused, and a cold shivering came over me. I threw the door forcibly open, as children are accustomed to do when they expect a specter to stand and waiting for them on the other side. But nothing appeared. I stepped fearfully into the apartment. The apartment was empty, and my bedroom was also freed from its hideous guest. I could hardly believe that so great a good fortune had befallen me, but when I became assured that my enemy indeed fled, I clapped my hands for joy and ran down to Clairvaux. This is a grown man. Where is my enemy? Where is the monster? Oh, he's gone? Let's get Clairvaux. Maybe that's how this guy acts. It's a bit strange. The next thing I want to talk about, just to put a bow on that, this character has had sort of a sudden degeneration. Frankenstein. From all of the composure and composition and work ethic and intelligence and gritty determination that he has had to this point, he achieves what it was he was trying to achieve, and all of a sudden, he has to run away and thinks that running away and taking no responsibility for his actions is going to be an answer, right? So I don't know. I mean, I don't think that's believable. And the next thing we can talk about, but and. Probably you have started to notice the prevalence of the words but and in this text. This is a cosmetic thing, I understand, but it is going to throw readers off. This is a cosmetic thing, I understand, but what you do is you limit your abilities as the writer when you become dependent on certain words. It means that you are slipping into the same speech patterns, the same sentence structures, time and again, which is not a strong way to write. In this chapter, but occurs 20 times and occurs 32 times. So between those two words, but and, there are 52 occurrences. There are 26 paragraphs, meaning there are two occurrences of either but and or and in each paragraph. It may seem a small cosmetic thing. As this novel goes on, you will notice it more and more. I beheld the wretch, the miserable monster whom I had created. He held up the curtain of the bed, and his eyes, if eyes they may be called, were fixed on me. His jaws opened, and he muttered some inarticulate sounds, while a grin wrinkled his cheeks. He may have spoken, but I did not hear. One hand was stretched out seemingly to detain me, but I escaped and rushed downstairs. I took refuge in the courtyard belonging to the house which I inhabited, where I remained during the rest of the night, walking up and down in the greatest agitation, listening attentively, catching and fearing each sound as if it were to announce the approach of the demoniacal corpse to which I had so miserably given life.